Okay, let's unpack this. Best practices.
It just sounds like such a good idea, doesn't it?
It really does.
I mean, who wouldn't want to follow the single best way? Seems like the goal.
Yeah, efficient, reliable, proven. It's incredibly appealing, that promise of certainty.
Right.
But here's where our source material today gets, well, really interesting.
Okay.
It argues that the term itself, best practice, is maybe fundamentally incompatible with, the agile mindset,
Compatible. Wow.
especially when you're dealing with genuinely complex work. It says it can actually be a kind of hidden trap, derail
A
things.
trap. That feels completely counterintuitive. How can the best way be a trap?
Well, that's what we're digging into. We're looking at some sources today that really explore why these standard sort of one-size-fits-all approaches can be the wrong tool,
Right.
especially in unpredictable environments.
Right. Okay. And this builds on our last deep dive, doesn't it? Talking about complexity versus just difficulty. It absolutely does. So our mission today is to really lay out why clinging to that best practice thinking can be, well, detrimental sometimes.
Okay.
We'll look at this framework from the source. It maps different kinds of work to practices that actually fit.
So you can see where standardization helps and where maybe adaptability is really what you need.
Exactly. Adaptability is the key capability.
All right, let's dive headfirst into this best practice trap then. What makes the term itself so problematic according to the source?
Well, the core issue is that it implies there's this perfect, unchallengeable final answer,
Mm.
you know, a pinnacle.
Okay. And if you think you found the best,
You stop looking. Why would you innovate or adapt if you're already doing the best?
right, it shuts down critical thinking.
Exactly. You just start deferring to this supposed ultimate standard.
Yeah.
Limits exploring new things, limits responding to change.
And this kind of thinking, it's very rooted in like traditional project management, right? Which loves predictability, loves standardization for efficiency.
That's it. And the source connects that directly to why approaches built with that project management mindset, like waterfall.
Yeah.
They often fall short when you try to apply them to really complex, uncertain situations, the kind you often see in, say, product or service management.
That's the crucial link then. Waterfall thinking is great where you can define, plan, execute standard stuff.
Exactly. But complex work, it just doesn't behave like that.
So how should we think about different work types, if not looking for the single best way? You mentioned a framework from the source.
Yeah, it's really helpful. It starts with simple work.
Okay, simple work. Like what?
Think clear cause and effect, obvious, repeatable. The source uses moving a pile of bricks.
Okay, lift brick, walk, place brick. Very clear, very repeatable.
Precisely. And in this domain, best practices are gold. They're super effective.
Right.
The source says standardization here boosts efficiency, cuts cost, reduces risk, increases reliability. There probably is a best way to stack bricks safely and quickly.
And you definitely want to follow it. Standardized solutions work.
Absolutely.
Okay, so that's simple. What about when things get a little more nuanced? What's next?
Next up is complicated work. This is where you might have multiple proven ways to get a good outcome.
Okay.
But understand the cause and effect might need some analysis, maybe some expertise. The analogy used is baking a cake.
Okay. Because there isn't just one single recipe for every cake situation,
Yeah.
right? Different ingredients, different ovens, maybe allergies.
Exactly. You've got options, but they're choices between like well-established, reliable techniques. So here you apply good practices.
Good practices, not best practices.
Right. Your expertise helps you select the approach that's the best fit for your specific context. You know, the ingredients you actually have, the time, the occasion. It's about informed choices between valid options.
Okay, simple, complicated. This is making sense. Now, the really interesting one, I guess, is complex work. This feels like Agile's home turf, right? Where best practice just breaks down.
It really does. Complex work happens in unpredictable conditions, cause and effect. You only really see it clearly looking back. In hindsight, the source uses this image, throwing a stone into a lake. Every ripple pattern is unique. You can't standardize the ripples.
Okay, yeah.
Think about developing totally new products or integrating cutting-edge AI. These are complex challenges, typical in product or service management. External factors can change things instantly.
So any fixed plan, any best practice would be kind of irrelevant almost immediately, like trying to follow a map when the landscape keeps changing under your feet, or you don't even know the destination for sure yet.
That's exactly. Standardization isn't just hard, it's basically impossible because things are so dynamic. The best path forward, You don't know it up front.
So what do you do?
It demands continuous adaptation, rapid learning, constant evolution. The source calls these emergent practices.
Emergent practices. Okay, like the right way to do it emerges from actually doing it,
Precisely. It requires teams who are, frankly, comfortable with ambiguity.
which is tough. Traditional project management tries to eliminate ambiguity, right?
Right. But in complex product or service management, you often have to embrace it. The destination might just be a general direction you're exploring, something that needs constant checking, constant validation,
So teams need to be pretty self-reliant.
immensely,
Hmm.
and skilled at learning, iterating fast based on what they discover. That iterative discovery, well, that's the core of Agile.
Less about following a known road, more about like building the road as you travel.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Structured discovery and adaptation, not just executing a plan someone wrote down ages ago.
Okay. And there's one more category. Sounds intense. Chaotic work.
It is. Think high uncertainty, instability. Understanding cause and effect is almost impossible. The source mentions trying to manage a really volatile argument.
Oh, wow. Okay. Unpredictable, unstable. A wrong move makes it worse.
Exactly. In that state, you're not thinking about best practices or even good practices.
You're just trying to survive, stabilize things.
Right. The focus shifts entirely to survival practices. Take immediate action, try to quell the instability, regain some control. Ideally, move the situation back towards complex or maybe even complicated, where you can start applying other approaches again.
This framework really highlights the mismatch then. Waterfall thinking, with its project management focus on efficiency via standardization, perfect for simple or complicated work.
It really is. Which explains why leaders coming from that traditional project management world, when they first encounter Agile in a product or service context,
Yeah.
they instinctively ask, okay, so what's the Agile best practice for doing this? It seems like a totally logical question from their perspective.
But it completely misses the point of Agile. Because Agile's success isn't about finding a new set of standards to follow.
No.
It's about building the capability to adapt effectively, which is what product and service management often demands.
Exactly that. And when they don't get those standard answers, well, the frustration can lead them to try and force the old thinking onto the new problem.
Like trying to break complex work into smaller pieces and standardize those.
Yes, what the source calls mini waterfalls.
Which, based on the framework, is like trying to fit that square peg into a round hole.
Precisely. You're applying methods suited for simple or complicated work to something that is fundamentally complex. And the key insight here is that complex work often can't be truly simplified that way. Too many variables, too much uncertainty. You just can't standardize or strategize the unknown parts.
But can Waterfall technically do complex work? I mean, the source implies it can. Otherwise, how did anything complex get built before Agile?
True, it's not strictly impossible, but the argument from the source is that it's incredibly inefficient, creates huge problems, like the time-to-market issues they saw back in the dot-com era. Trying to manage complex product development with a project management approach designed for standardization, it's like hammering a screw.
Oh, that's a great analogy. You might get it in eventually.
Yeah, maybe.
But it's slow, painful, you're using the wrong tool, and the result probably isn't great.
Exactly. You have a screwdriver, the adaptive approaches of Agile, but you're insisting on using the hammer, the standardized processes of Waterfall. Agile isn't meant to be just a new waterfall with different best practices.
It's a different kind of tool.
A fundamentally different way of working, yeah. Suited to the unpredictable nature of complex problems, especially in product and service management.
Okay, so the shift isn't about throwing out all structure. It's about embracing structured adaptation. Even if, as the source notes, it feels a bit like navigating near chaos sometimes, what's the core mindset shift needed?
The real shift, I think, happens when you stop asking that default project management question. What's the best practice?
And start asking.
Fundamentally different questions. Questions rooted in learning and adaptation. Like, okay, what are we actually learning right now?
Right.
Or how can we adapt what we're doing based on this new information? Or maybe, what little experiment should we try next to check our understanding?
Those aren't questions looking for a static, standard answer.
Not at all. They're questions designed to help you discover those emergent practices as you go along.
That completely flips the perspective, doesn't it? You're not looking backward for a known solution. You're looking forward, driven by curiosity and, well, learning.
Absolutely. It's an agile mindset. It stops treating uncertainty as just a problem to be controlled or eliminated.
And start seeing it as, what, An opportunity.
An environment for discovery and adaptation, yeah. This empowers teams to pivot when they need to. And it changes how you view things that don't go quite as planned.
So failure isn't really failure, it's just data, information guiding the next step.
Precisely. In these really complex environments, the most valuable skill isn't just being good at following predefined standards.
Yeah.
It's the capability to lead adaptively through the journey, constantly learning, managing risks as you go. Adaptability itself becomes the key competitive advantage, especially in that complex product and service landscape.
Okay, so pulling this all together, the big takeaway is this really clear distinction. Standardization, awesome for simple and complicated work, drives that efficiency crucial in project management.
Yep.
But for complex work, common in product and service management, where unpredictability is just part of the game, adaptability isn't just important, it's way more effective.
That's the absolute heart of the source's argument. Using the right approach for the right kind of work
Yeah.
makes sense.
It really does. So as you're listening to this, maybe think about where you see this best practice, thinking perhaps holding things back, limiting adaptability in your own work or your team's environment.
Yeah, and how could you maybe shift the conversation, move away from seeking those standard answers and towards asking those better, more generative questions?
Like, what are we learning? How can we adapt? What experiment should we try next? Maybe fostering more of a culture of, continuous experimentation.
And here's a final thought, sort of building on the source material. Maybe the most valuable skill you can build in this increasingly complex world isn't actually finding and following rules that promise certainty.
But maybe it's the ability to confidently lead and navigate adaptively right through that inherent uncertainty, right through the unknown.
Exactly. Definitely something to mull over.
We've really only scratched the surface here. This framework is fascinating, and thinking about applying the right practices to the right work has huge implications.
For sure.
So if you want to explore this further, really dive deeper into the original material, especially that video the source is based on, which is really compelling. We strongly encourage you to check out the links. They're all right there in the description for you. Go take a look.